How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm about to leave for London. I leave for 3 weeks tonight. So I'm like a little anxious because I haven't been away from home and my person and my dogs for that long. Like I've been home basically, aside from certain weekends now that shows have been picked up, 18 months.
Yeah.
I got, so leaving for 3 weeks kind of seems like a lot, but I'm also so excited to see my friends out in the UK and just, I think I'm doing a music video out there and a photo shoot and songwriting session. So I'm excited, but also a little nervous but also excited. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good way to explain it, actually. I mean, you were talking about how everything's sort of kicking back into gear. And I mean, especially after this weekend, I wasn't at any of the festivals, but I was just saying to somebody, I mean, it seemed like half the country was at one festival or another. And
yeah.
It sort of felt like this was the first weekend where things really were back, in full gear.
Yeah.
And I don't know, even for me who wasn't there, I kind of wasn't ready to even just see it happening, even though, this is like what we want, right? Like it's a good thing, but yeah, it's a weird adjustment. How has it been for you going back to shows?
At first it was, the first few shows, the first one, I was so excited that I just felt like I was just going to poof into just a ball of glitter because I just was so excited that I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, here I am. I'm about to DJ. I'm about to sing. This is so incredible. And then the next few shows, there were so many people. So it was kind of a little bit sensory overload. I was like, whoa, this is a little intense. I'm not used to being around this many people. And I mean, how did we go from literally we have to stay home and not do anything to then all of a sudden, we're allowed to do this? I just was freaked out. But now I honestly feel like I've been in the groove. I've been doing shows since May. So
right.
I'm just back into the swing of it now.
Well, that's good. I mean, it must have been I was thinking about this when I knew we were coming to talk. I mean, you've been sort of solidly on tour for so many years.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been, it was odd for everybody, but I think for you, maybe in particular, it must have been an odd pandemic year because my perception of you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, the last, 5 years leading up to that, it seemed like you were just on tour sort of constantly in that time.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot, honestly. I know I really needed the world to stop for a second. And I really savored every moment that I had where I didn't have to do anything. And I was on tour all the time. And I thought that's just what I had to do. But I also I had the music, but I didn't have the machine to plug the music. So it's interesting because I think a year before the pandemic, I signed to Ultra must have been, I don't remember exactly what year, but let's just say I was a year before the pandemic. So I'm getting ready, putting out music and then doing all these shows. And then the pandemic happens and, I stopped doing all these shows, but then I'm putting out music at least once a month. And it's I still found a way to be in everyone's face,
Yeah.
And I think it really, a lot of artists didn't put out music because they were like, well, no one's going to listen to it, or, it's not going to get as much traction as I want it to because I can't tour with it. And that's the whole point of you put out music and then you tour so that it sticks and stays. And I just put it out anyway. And, I just celebrated my 4th US Dance Radio #1. And I really think that that's because through the pandemic, I just put out music and it was like all the other people weren't necessarily putting it out. So I was able to just cut through everything and like find my way to the top.
Yeah.
And now that things are starting again, like my name is still, my name is a lot more familiar. So I won't need to like trudge through all of that to have my music be heard. So honestly, like, at least in regards to shows, I needed the break because I also needed to realize, like, I don't necessarily want to be doing that all the time. I don't want to be gone every weekend, you know?
Yeah, I think that's such a valuable realization. And there's something in what you just said, too, about putting out music during the pandemic. I've been talking to a lot of people about this idea of, well, why do we actually do this, right? And I think that's like another thing the pandemic gave us an opportunity to figure out. It's like, well, why am I in this again? Like, what do I actually like about this? And what you said, you know, putting out music in service of touring it and all of that, which is, of course, a valid reason. And it's why we all make music expecting that, yeah, we can take it on tour and, you know, sort of build ourselves up that way. But then at the same time, if you think about it, that's like kind of a business mentality, right? And maybe there's other good like maybe art for art's sake is not all that bad, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a business look, but it's also like, I want people to hear this. And in a world where, you know, new music is coming out every day, constantly, like it's important to tour because people can hear you sing the songs that you write, you know? So for me, like,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I get what you're saying though. But I wasn't even just putting it out for art. I mean, obviously I'm creating this. I love this. And they're all my songs are my children. And, you know, I'm putting them out as a cathartic form for me and hopefully for others. But at the same time, like, I want people to hear the music. So, I mean, there was a time I put out a song and it was like right at the height of everything. And I was just like, this is literally the worst time to put out a song.
Right.
But I put another one out next month or whatever. So it didn't matter really, you know, it's just the things that build on top of each other.
Yeah. Well, so a couple more things in what you just said. I mean, consistency, which I think is a great, you know, that's maybe more important than anything else in terms of an artistic career like that, is just being something that people can rely on, being able to, like you said, like you were still in people's faces one way or another. I think that's such a big key. And yeah, what I was saying earlier, I was more or less trying to compliment what you did, which is, I think it's like, well, okay, so if the touring is gone, a lot of people maybe said, well, maybe this isn't a good time to put out music because it just doesn't
monetarily,
monetarily, logistically, whatever it is. But then it's like, well, no, music is still good, right? Like we all still like music and we all still need music. And so I don't know. I liked that you did that. I thought that was great. And I mean, even your album, Messing with Magic, I mean, that came out during the pandemic as well, right? Which I'm sure that was another conversation or another thought process to go through of like, do we drop a full project during the pandemic?
It was. I honestly don't know what compelled me to just still release music. I mean, it was like we were on lockdown, but we weren't, you know, we were still doing our thing. We weren't flying all the time everywhere, but we were still living our lives. And for me, a lot of the songs on the album I had written for so long, like I really like to just put things out to make room for new. And so for me, like, you know, there was talks about potentially releasing it in 2021. But for me, I was like, no, I really want to conclude this year releasing this stuff. And then the deluxe album came about and I ended up putting songs like Boogie All Night and Don't Say Goodbye on, which I had written in 2020 on Zoom sessions. And, you know, so it was like, I wouldn't have been able to release the new if I hadn't released the old, or, you know, so I'm just a big fan of just like follow your heart and put it out there. You just never know, you know? Yeah.
Well, are you the kind of person, are you always writing? Is that a happy place for you? Is that a mode that comes easily to you? Like, even if you don't know necessarily that you're writing for an album or whatever, but is that part of your creative process? Is it always kind of running in the background?
I think so. I mean, for me, unless I'm having a writing session, I'm not really working on music necessarily. I mean, I'm always doing little things on my voice notes or writing in my journal. Like I journal a lot, but it is an easy thing to access though. When the time comes for me to write, it's an easy access for me.
Well, maybe that's a good way to sort of go back a little bit, because it makes me wonder, if it's always been that way for you. And maybe like by way of getting to that question, maybe we can talk about a little earlier on, before the whirlwind touring, before the well before the pandemic. Am I right that you were born in New York?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And how long did you live there? Because I know you moved around a bit as a kid.
Yeah. Well, we didn't live there that long. I must have been maybe 4 when we moved to California.
Okay, so I would imagine a lot of your early childhood memories are LA based.
Yeah, they are. I have like some really old memories of being in New York when I was really little, but they're more like feelings than visions, you know?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. I was just talking to somebody, this is kind of a side tangent, but I was just talking to somebody about how it's very interesting to me how, they say sort of ages like 1 through 5 are so key to a kid's development. And it's where it's like where a lot of who you're going to become is determined. But then it's so weird that mostly what we can remember of that time is what you said. It's just kind of vague feelings, right?
Yeah. I know. It's so interesting how those years, I mean, even before we're a year old, are so formative of who we are, like as human beings, our attachment styles and like the way we love or want to be loved. It's so interesting. There's not really a way we can turn back that either. Just like years of therapy and
right. Yeah. Years of therapy just to kind of get like a vague guess at what it was.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even about like pinpointing the moment, but like more focusing on, okay, this is what I do, but I don't want to do it anymore. So how do I change that? Or this is what I view the world to be, but I know that that's not real. So how do I not see it that way anymore?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then, some of that work, whether it's therapy or whatever process people are using, is just trying to figure out, well, why do I feel that way? Or why do I think that? And where does that come from? And if I figure out where it comes from, does that help me change it in the moment? It's so bizarre to me, just how I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Sorry to get off on a tangent.
No, me too. I mean, just one last thing is like, for me, a lot of the things that I've worked in therapy, like I know that there are specific moments that altered my life potentially forever, but also there are like core personality traits in me. And that's kind of why I brought up the questions of like, this is how I see things, but I know that this isn't true. So how do and there's no way to like pinpoint how this happened or how I started to see the world this way. It's just, it could be a million things. So for me, like my next like big chapter is figuring out like, how to see things differently. Just another, like my whole life is like, these are the glasses I'm wearing. Oh, let me try taking them off. Oh my gosh. Okay. Now I'm wearing these glasses. Okay. Now I need to take them off, and like, just kind of like unveiling the way that the world really is.
Yeah. You got to get your prescription checked every once in a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As a glasses wearer, I relate to that analogy very much.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me wonder, I mean, as long as we're talking about this, do you think, how do you think that ties in with you as a musician, as a songwriter, as a creative? Like, do you think, that kind of work, whether it's therapy, whether it's just, analyzing yourself, being in the moment, any of that kind of thing, has that affected your creative process over time? Like, if you look at, say, the singer or the songwriter or the producer that you were, when you kind of came on the scene, call it 2012, 2013, and you look at yourself as a singer, songwriter, producer in 2021, is it a very different kind of creator? Do you feel like you're creating differently?
Yeah. I mean, with every change of my life comes new music and new ways that I write. I think in the beginning, I don't know. I felt had a talent for songwriting, and I feel like there has been a consistency. Like I love writing. I love storytelling, whether that applies to like a story of my life or a story of someone else's life or a made up story. And that's stayed consistent. But I think as I've started to evolve, I write about evolution or like growing and like leaving toxic relationships or, you know, things like that. So I think I write what is parallel to what's been going on with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And, you know, sometimes it's kind of like, you know, anything in life, learning life lessons. I think you can think about it objectively, you can write about it, but until you go through it, there's, you know, you can't really understand it. It's the same way, like, like for me, I do everything wrong the first time in my life. You know what I mean? And then once I've done it wrong, I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand how to do this better.
Yeah. I mean, no one's there to teach us. And then like the people who say they're teaching us don't really know what the fuck they're doing either. So right. We're all just trying to figure it out.
Isn't that another weird realization when you get old enough to realize that all the adults don't know what they're doing either?
Yeah. Like we're all just taking it a day at a time, like just trying to figure it out. Seriously.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's the older I get, the more true that is every day. I mean, it makes me wonder, like, you're talking about evolution as a songwriter and talking about new things and new aspects to your life. When were you always writing songs? Were you writing songs as a kid, like well before any kind of profession was in the picture?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure how old I was, but I would, you know, there would be guitars and pianos at my house, and I would just play stuff and just make stuff up on the piano or the guitar and just kind of write little things here and there. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to write this. Like I also kind of missed that where I could write and it was just getting something out versus now, even if I go to the piano to get something out, I'll then end up, you know, recording it because I'm like, oh, this sounds really pretty. Like I should use this or something. Yeah. So I miss that moment. I don't know if I'll ever get back to there, but
man, that's a bittersweet realization. I think that's something everybody has to figure out, especially in like a creative vocation, is when what we do for play and what we do for passion becomes what we rely on for rent money, you know, all of that. Yeah. Like it's a jarring transition. And I don't know that it ever, I mean, for me, I still haven't totally figured it out. It's almost like you have to, I don't know, you have to find the fun in a different way.
Yeah, maybe with like dancing or something that I don't take as serious. Like dancing for me, I didn't grow up a dancer, but I started taking dance classes before the pandemic and it was just so much fun. And like, I think that's probably what that would be for me, like taking dance classes and like dancing around my house. I'm not trying to make up a routine. I'm just trying to like let all my energy out.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that's like putting yourself back in that childlike place, right? Where you don't already know how it should be done. And there's not necessarily an end goal of, you know, making money off of it or being a part of a scene. I love that. I think I talk a lot about the fact I think DJs need hobbies. Like, just in general, I think every kind of creative needs a hobby that's not their main thing. Yeah,
it's so true. That's a really good point.
I guess probably that's true for anybody, but for what we do, for sure. So, I mean, if you're young and playing around on the piano and just having fun writing whatever comes to you, and I know you come from an entertainment background as well, right? Like your whole family more or less was involved in the entertainment industry.
My grandma and my dad was in soap operas and he was an actor a while ago, but Yeah.
Yeah. So
I guess more than the average person.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess all of that is to say that maybe the idea of doing stuff like this was a little more normalized in your household than maybe some others.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And maybe encouraged, like, was you being creative encouraged by them? Maybe because it was sort of a familiar thing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, my grandma would always make me play, and I said this in an interview one time, but I was living with her a while, like a long time ago. And it was so much fun. She was like my bestie. Rest in peace. I love Grandma Chloe. But so yeah, I was living with her, and it was freaking amazing because we would go out to like these amazing dinners. We would go to movie premieres and like these fun parties. And one time, all these PETA people were coming over to do an interview with her. So like people are setting up cameras and microphones and all that to like film something. And she goes, go play something on the piano. And I was like she was like, sing me a song on the piano. And I was like, well, I mean, there's all these people here. I'm not just going to like randomly start belting it out. Like, just, it's kind of awkward. And she was like, when someone tells you to sing, you sing. So I was like, okay.
That's
so literally
classic.
Like,
yeah.
From that, I just have to do it. So like she made me sing, and it just was like, okay, everyone's doing their own thing in this like area, and you want me to literally just get on the piano and start like singing. It just felt
How
a little
old were
awkward.
you, do you think?
Like 18.
Okay.
17.
And had you been doing any kind of performing other than, for family members in your house before that?
Yeah, I mean, even in high school, I had a little band called Suburban Nightlife with this guy. It was me and this guy. It was like a duo, and he played guitar and piano, and it was like this little indie band, and we would sing and perform. I mean, I guess it was a totally different style of music.
Sure.
But, yeah, I mean, I would be so nervous. Like, it's just insane the way I am now versus the way I used to be.
Do you think it's your grandma's influence that helped you get over that a little bit? Or was that something that just sort of developed over time?
I think it's something that developed over time. I mean, obviously, because she said when someone asks you to sing, you sing. I don't know how the fuck I found myself in situations like at Santa Monica College where my professor like asked me to sing in front of the class, or I was a hostess at this restaurant and the manager like told me there was this really influential woman in jazz and he wanted me to sing at her table. Like I started to find myself in situations like that, and I would sing so. I mean, it doesn't make it any less nerve-wracking, but now I'm just so much more, because it's what I do, I'm so much more comfortable. I think it's like if I have a place where it's expected of me, it's different. I can just, turn it on immediately. I think it's just practice and enough practice and doing it enough to know that I'm good and that people enjoy listening to me, and that I'm more than just a voice. Like I'm an artist. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I think all those hours of practice and that consistency that we talked about earlier, it's funny because I'm relating to what you're saying a lot, where I still get anxious about all kinds of stuff in my career, but I have also been doing it long enough that I can, on my good days, I can separate that and be like, well, this is just a feeling I'm having, but I know I've been doing this a long time. And, there's sort of a baseline competency that you achieve at a certain point. And that is even if it doesn't feel like it at the time, that it's a nice feeling to know that just like at my worst, it'll still be fine, Yeah,
definitely.
And that you've worked enough to get to that point. That is, now that you say that is actually a really nice feeling that I think only those hours and hours and hours of practice can give you.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you don't just thinking back now when I used to perform in Suburban Nightlife, we would be sitting down in these chairs and I would sing into the mic and I don't even think I would look at the crowd. I would just sing And I think my face, like I must have been like sweaty and my face was red and I was all clammy and like felt like I was gonna puke. And now, I mean, if I was doing an acoustic when I do acoustic shows, I'm just totally so much more fluid on stage. I'm like making jokes, being a little sarcastic and like just having fun. And I think that's the thing is like have fun with it. I think that's like the big thing in my life is I get so nervous and so freaked out and like, well, what if this? And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like the only thing that matters is like, are you having fun?
Right.
Just have fun. It doesn't like at the end of the day, like if your voice cracks, if this, if that, like just laugh. Like now that I've been DJing, if you train wreck or whatever, like just say like, uh-oh, on the mic and then just fucking like turn up the bass, you know, it's just, there's so many things you can do to have fun.
Well, and sometimes
that's the biggest part.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when you acknowledge those cracks in the facade, of which I have many and many, you know, I think also that's people like that, you know, because I think that's how you make a connection. That's almost how you can be in the moment with people more, at least for me. Pretending
like it doesn't happen is probably the worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, that's a great point.
Well, oh God, because then it like makes it, because when you laugh about it or bring it up, it includes the audience in the conversation and it almost creates a bond versus not saying anything.
Right.
It's like we're separated. And now that that's happened, we're separated even more.
Yeah.
So bring them, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And to go back to what you said about having fun too, I think that reminds me of what we started off talking about of, you know, the fact that we got into this very innocently just because it was something we liked and were attracted to. And that's part of it, right? Is like just enjoying the fun of it and not allowing the stress part of it to take over the career considerations. I think that's another way you can kind of get back to those like original passions about it, which I think is sort of, when we're our best selves, that's like why people like anything we do, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. It's really interesting. I don't know. I love talking about the motivations behind all this stuff, but I want to get back to kind of those early days. And, you know, you're a teenager, you've got this group, you're in high school. Were you thinking about a creative vocation? Were you thinking about were you thinking about the future, what you wanted to do with your life at this point?
No, I didn't at all. I mean, I think the only thing I really remember was like, I was like, well, I have to go to college because that's like the right thing to do. See, like we're all trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. And like, for me, my biggest fear is like, not having any money and not having any resources and just assuming that everything's going to pan out for me. So I think for me, like, you know, I didn't go to like a crazy college. I went to Santa Monica Community College, but I went, you know, to just put one foot in front of the other. That's what society tells me to do. So that's what I'm going to do. So I can feel, you know, good about that. But in the meantime, I was also taking acting classes at Ruskin School of Acting in Santa Monica or like that area as well. And then I was also taking like piano and singing, and I don't know, I don't think I really had a plan. I don't think I've ever really had a plan. I just do the things that sound good to me and then the rest kind of follows.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that you felt like you kind of had to go on this track to do the normal thing, which was very much my experience too. But it's interesting, you know, having a father and a grandmother who were in that industry who maybe took a less traditional path that you still felt like, no, this is, you know, this is what I need to do kind of as a default.
Yeah, I mean, my grandma was just this kind of crazy person who I don't know, everything just kind of fell into place for her. But I honestly feel like everything kind of fell into place for me too. Yeah, it's just kind of what I thought I had to do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, especially when you're young, I think that's kind of all you can do, right? It's hard to have the kind of perspective we're talking about right now when you're 18 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did it, I know eventually you ended up like singing and writing for ABC, the network. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah. So I was at SMC. I had a friend who was doing like videography, and we did a little video of me singing Girl from Ipanema. And then we put it on YouTube, and a friend's sister, one of my best friend's sister, posted it on her Facebook. And apparently she was good friends with a woman who was like the head of music for ABC Family. And she was like, oh my God, who is this girl? Like, I would love to meet her. And then literally like, she reached out to me and was like, could you come play us some music on the guitar? I'm just like, I'm not a talented guitar player. Like I can play some things. Like I wrote songs on guitar, but it wasn't like I used the guitar in a way to create sounds that I wanted to create, like not in a professional way at all.
Not in like a composition sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, this is how I'm finding this, and I'm going to write to like this thing. So I went in, I was so nervous, like, oh my God, what's happening? And I played some songs on the guitar, whatever I wrote. And from there, she hired me to do like a 5-song contract where I would write and sing on 5 songs that they would use for TV shows and, whatever. So that was really, really cool. Yeah, it was honestly amazing. Such a great opportunity. And it's just like, that's kind of how my life has ended up being. Like, I've just said yes to all the things that I should say yes to.
Right.
It's like my grandma, like, sing when people are here, you sing, even though it's really awkward and everything's quiet and they're literally setting up the camera gear, and she wants me to go to the piano and just start singing randomly. And, if my friend wants to film something, well, let's put it on YouTube. Or if, she wants me to come to the office, I don't have any songs perfected, or they're not fully fleshed out songs, but who fucking cares? I'm going to go and sing her some music. It didn't need to be perfect for me to go and meet with her. That's the thing. I think people just don't do anything because they think it's not good enough or not perfect enough. And that's the thing, is like, it's never going to be if that's the kind of way you're thinking. Like,
right.
It never is. I mean, there's always things that you can look back on. And I don't even remember necessarily the songs that I played for her. I do know they were like my 16-year-old written songs, nothing fleshed out. And I went and I sang for her. And, that's kind of been my life, just putting myself in situations where I say yes and I just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think that's such a huge key for anybody trying to do something creative. Is you can never, there's these quotes I say on the podcast all the time, but the two I always go back to is, you can never let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? You get so obsessed trying to make something perfect that it never actually happens, or you never put it out, whatever it is. And then the other one is great art is never completed. It is only abandoned. Right. And it's one of those things, like, there is no such thing as the perfect work of art. There's no perfect idea. You can always go back and look at something you did in the past and think of a way you could have done it differently. But totally. For you, I wonder though, like, I guess it sounds like you've kind of always been like this, saying yes to the opportunities, putting yourself out there. Was that ever difficult for you, or was that a different part of your brain you were able to access to just be like, nope, don't think about it, just go do it and figure it out later?
I mean, yeah, it's always difficult for me. I'm always cringing. I'm always nervous. I'm always like, don't know if I'm going to be good enough. Like, literally every single time I'm like, oh my God. Like, in quarantine, when I had started, doing more DJing, the label was like, we want you to do this hour Mix Mag Live at home session. And I was like, but I'm not, like, to do Mix Mag, you need to be like really good. And I'm, I'm not there yet. And they were like, yes, you are. You just think you're not, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't trust you guys that you're like in my corner here.
Right.
But it's just like that. Like, I'm still so nervous. Like, I still want to be the best. Like, I want to be perfect. I want to be so good. And I don't know if I am or if I ever can be, but I know that I just do it anyway. And like, I think it now has like over 300,000 views or something like that. And so many people post it on their story or watch it. And I was so nervous before I went to film that thing. Like, literally, I filmed it at my friend Lee Foss's house. And I think we were going to film at like 1 or something like that. And I had literally got to his house like early in the morning, so I could just run through the set over and over and over and over again until, until it was time to film. So I'm always nervous.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. And DJing too. I mean, you didn't start touring as a DJ until later in your career, right?
Until like 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. Until like very recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm bouncing around a little bit now, but I am curious because I think, and I've talked to other people about this. I just had Kalina Zanders on the podcast a little while ago. And
love her.
Oh, she's incredible. And a few other people as well. But I think it's weird in dance music because I think singers can sometimes almost be treated like second-class citizens, despite the fact that they are, I would almost argue, maybe the most important component of these songs. But it's such a producer-driven like scene. I'm curious how that transition was for you from going to, starting as like a featured singer, turning into, the artist, the front woman, and then now a DJ as well. Was any part of that transition like hard to make for you?
No, I think the only thing that made it hard was just the norm that the producer is first.
Right.
Like, I can't tell you how many songs that I have, but like, I need to add a big name producer on it in order for it to even get the recognition that I can get with it. It's so fucking annoying. Like, that's the thing that makes it hard, is that I just can't put out a song yet. I mean, that's the thing, is like, I'm working to that point.
Right.
Because if it's me, it can get here, but if it's me and X, whoever, it can get here. So I'll like be like, oh my God, I have the best song. Like, I love this song. It's so me, like, it's perfect. And they're like, oh, well, we should add this person to it. And I'm like, why? It's my song.
Right.
It's like, well, because it's going to like get a lot more listens. It's going to get, and it's just so like, I feel so defeated, even though I understand the concept behind it. And I am grateful, because without these people, like, it might not have gotten the success, only because their names are bigger than mine.
Sure.
That's the only reason, not because like alone I can't do it. But that's just frustrating to realize that every place that I've gone in my career is dependent on a man's opinion of me, or what he has allowed or not allowed to happen in my life, depending on who that man is.
Right.
To think about that is like so disheartening, but I also have gotten really far, and I don't know, I don't know. But
yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for using that kind of frustration as fuel, right? I mean, I think that's what you're doing sounds like a productive use of those feelings. But those feelings are absolutely valid. I mean, it's, as you were talking, I was sort of realizing I was framing it as, sort of producer versus singer. But let's be honest, if we really break it down, it does break down to, it's a male-driven...
Man versus woman.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Producer equals man, and woman as the singer or vocalist that most of the time isn't even credited.
Yeah.
And like you said, the thing that makes it best is the vocal. Like, let's be real. It depends, though. I mean, yes, there's some songs are so epic, so it's not every single song. Yeah,
of course. And I think, this is we all know what we're talking about here. I mean, it's to me, at least, a well-known thing that just singers don't really get their due. And dance music particularly is a very male-driven scene. even for, women producers, like that almost to me goes to like, well, why aren't there more, female scientists and all that? And we get into this societal thing of like what girls are told they can and can't do at a young age. And I don't know if that's going too far down a rabbit hole, but I kind of feel like that we can even see that in our little corner of dance music,
Yeah. There was this one woman who posted like a funny reel on Instagram, like me when I'm the only female booked on like an all person lineup. And it's like, yeah, why is it just, oh, well, the festival like made their quota because they booked one female act or whatever. And it's like, no, like, I don't want to play with a bunch of dudes. Like I want to play with like, let's spice it up,
Right.
Like it just looks better. It feels better. Like, there's so many of us just.
Well, yeah. And it's only going to make the community better too, right? Like that to me is always the weird part about, I mean, I'm not a promoter. I don't know exactly why these choices are made, but to me, it seems so obvious that if the lineups were more inclusive and if our scene was just more inclusive in general, wouldn't that make the community better? Wouldn't that include like more people? Wouldn't that, at the end of the day, even if I take the position of like an asshole businessman, like wouldn't that generate, like that's just a wider audience you could bring in,
Well, I mean, regardless, it's just people are like all types of people are going to raves and shows. So
right. So why not represent them?
I agree.
Yeah. No, we're on the same page here. I'm just yelling on my porch at this point. But so it does make me wonder though, like we're talking about dance music and I was reading some old interviews when I knew we were coming to talk. And I read an interview with Lee Foss and he actually said a quote I thought was really interesting where I think he was just talking about being grateful to work with you and grateful to know you. And he said, I don't know if this is an exact quote, but it was something like, she could have been a pop star, but, instead she's here working with me or, doing what she's doing. And it made me wonder, like, why dance music? Where did dance music enter the picture for you? How did that end up being the lane you went down? Because it does sound like you could have maybe gone in a bunch of different directions at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still heading towards that pop route. I think for me, like a lot of my music now has been a lot more pop leaning. For instance, my track Don't Say Goodbye, I think is a very like pop dance track. Yeah. And honestly, I love house music. I love dance music. And it's a lot easier to like get fame, at least for me. Like I know that, okay, let me tackle this first, right, and then I can like slowly and steadily make my way over to this area. But to be a pop star is like, I saw when I was working for ABC Family with the music videos and the dress code and the not being able to say certain things, like I just didn't want to do that.
Right. Yeah, I got the cat here.
I just didn't want to be like a cookie cutter. Like I have to do this to be this. Right. And with dance music, I can do and be whatever the fuck and sing about whatever the fuck I want to. And that's it. And so I can get my recognition and then, slowly transition over.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, that makes total sense. And you're totally right. Don't let me pigeonhole you as a dance artist at all. What I should have asked, I guess, is, do you see how do you see yourself at this point? Like, do you feel like you're more strongly any one thing than another? Like, do you think of yourself as a certain kind of artist? I think I know what you're saying. Like, I think for me, my goal is like what I could compare myself to, or what my hope is to be, is because there's also different levels of fame. And like, right, I don't want to be a Britney Spears. Like, I don't even think I want to be like a Dua Lipa type of Billie Eilish fame. Like that is it's just another type of territory that I don't know if I want to necessarily be a part of. But like Robin, for instance, is a great, amazing, talented artist. And she's had hits and she tours and she does really well and has such a fun creative team. Like that is something that I would want to do, like have an amazing, huge fan base, put out music. But I think it would probably be a little bit more than that. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah, I absolutely get what you're saying. And this is something I talk about a lot on this show too, is sort of that everybody really does have to define success for themselves at a certain point. Because I think when you get into it, it's easy to just be like, yeah, I want to be super famous. Like I want to, I want to do everything. I want to get as far as I can possibly get. But then at least for me, once I got into this career a bit and started meeting people who were legitimately extremely famous and seeing what their life was like, it's like, oh, I don't know if that's exactly what I want my life to be like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like Jamie Jones, look, he's famous in the dance world, but is he famous, if we were walking down the street and, we were somewhere, like, would someone recognize him like they would Billie Eilish? No. But he still has his own level of fame, Right. So I still think like I am achieving a level of fame, and I want to continue, reaching out to more people, and I want to continue my success. But I also don't think it's going to be like, I don't know. I like my life. I like my introvertedness, and defining what you want is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear you say you're introverted as well, because I feel like that might surprise some people who just know you from your music. Yeah,
totally. I'm an introvert 100%. Like when I'm my Anabel Englund self, I'm someone else. Like I'm just a lot more open, I guess. I mean, they're both versions of me, but I also, like when I'm not doing shows and stuff, I'm super shy. Like when I meet new people, I don't talk about my music or anything like that unless people like really start asking me about what I do. I like to more ask people about their lives.
Sure.
So I just don't fucking like to keep talking about myself. I talk about myself enough. Honestly, I don't need to keep talking about myself.
Yeah, I feel you. Well, apologies for this interview where all I'm asking you to do is talk about yourself.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'll do things where I talk about myself, and but that's why, like, in regular everyday conversations, like, I don't feel the need to continue, like, just giving everyone my life story.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And so for you to kind of get back to the timeline of it a little bit, I mentioned Lee Foss earlier, and you said you were, longtime friend. You did the live stream at his house recently. Meeting him and Jamie Jones, who you also mentioned, that was kind of a big inflection point for your early career, right? How did you end up meeting them?
I met Lee Foss at the Standard a long time ago. I was 18, and we were just all hanging out together, partying. And I was with my other friend, and she basically was like towards the end of the night, she was like, she sings, right? And he was like, really? Yeah. Oh, well, sing me something. Here I am again, where like someone asked me to sing. So then I sing him a song, and he was like, wow, really pretty. And then literally like within the next couple of weeks, I was in the studio with him and MK working on our song Electricity.
Right. Which ended up being a really big song, right?
Yeah. And that was our first song we ever made. And then after that, Lee used that to say to Jamie, like, hey, I found this amazing vocalist. Like, we should bring her to London and for Hot Natured songwriting sessions. And at the time I was like so infatuated with house music. I was just falling in love with it, and like the scene and the people and the producers and the DJs, and literally found myself on a flight to London working with like the biggest producers at the time. I was just like, are you effing kidding me? Like, I couldn't believe where I was and what I was doing. Literally, I was just
at such a young age too. That's just gotta be wild.
Yeah, it was honestly a trip. It was a trip. And I hit the ground running from there with shows and the nightlife in the UK and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it took off fairly quickly, right? Like, I know Electricity, obviously, we said was a big hit, but the touring, all of that, am I right that all of that happened pretty quickly after that first, song?
Mm-hmm. We did Electricity, and I think once I started doing reverse skydiving in all of our songs with Hot Natured and performing there, Hot Natured, then the guys wanted to have me tour with them around the world. And so I was just touring with them and like following their lead, and, that all happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what was it like if you think back to that early whirlwind time of, you're 18, 19, all of a sudden you're thrown into this whole new thing of touring all over the world and shows all the time and being young in a place where probably there's, like the other young people you're seeing are in the crowd, not the people like backstage, right? Like if you just think back to that, like, are there any impressions or memories that come to mind more strongly than others?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've always been a really kind of old soul. So I didn't act like I mean, in a lot of ways, I didn't act like your regular 18-year-old, but I was 18,
right.
So I think it was easy for people to forget, like, look, I'm 18. I'm really young and I've never been to London before. I've never been any of these places before. And I think people just assumed that I was good and no one really put me under their wing and like showed me how to do this thing. And I was with a lot of 35 plus year old dudes, like drinking and partying and stuff. And so I was like, well, I see them doing it, so this is what I do too.
Right.
That was the norm and I wanted to fit in and these are my idols. So that's kind of what I did. And it brought me to my knees. Honestly, it was really hard. Like it all caught up with me at some point. And, I mean, it would, there was nothing my parents could do because they were in America and I was just off and away doing my own thing, like living my own little fabulous life. But I felt really alone at certain times. And I felt like everyone was then like judging me, but no one told me what to do or how to do it. And they all like provided this lifestyle for me, but then were like, condemning me for it. And I didn't know what people expected of me or what people wanted from me. And I felt really alone, I think.
That's really, really heavy, as all that changed all of a sudden, all of those expectations. I mean, and again, at a young age, I think that's super heavy for anyone to deal with, let alone doing it, kind of in the public eye to a certain extent. How did you find the balance in it? I mean, if we're moving forward a little bit, was there like a light bulb moment where you sort of started to even it out, or was it another one of those things where just over time, over repetition, you sort of figured out, maybe these are healthier rhythms?
I mean, I think at a certain point I was like, well, I just need to get sober because this is just too much. And I was really depressed and I got sober and I'm almost 6 years sober.
Amazing. Congrats.
And thank you. And I mean, it's literally like just only going up from here.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's fantastic. I think that's a good lesson for anybody listening back to this. Absolutely. And I did that sort of coincide around the time you were getting sober and finding the balance with all that. Did that start to coincide when you were starting to step out as the front woman, as Anabel Englund, the woman on the track, not the feature on the track?
Well, I mean, before I got sober, I was just really lost. I would like do shows, but I don't know. I was just lost. And so when I got sober, I obviously like, this is my passion. This is what I love to do. So I used my resources to like work with people and create songs. And like, for me, it was just like not stopping was like the key. Yeah. I don't know exactly like how it happened, but I would make songs and put them out, even if I had to like self-release stuff and like self-distribute everything.
Yeah, well, that's that consistency that we were talking about again. And I think, as throughout this whole conversation, I really love what you're saying, which is that, yeah, it's more that you're operating off of instinct rather than calculation, which I think in the end is probably why it's working, right?
Totally. Yeah. If I went off my calculation, I would not be where I am today. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I love to hear that. I think that's a great lesson for anybody listening to this. And, the album Messing with Magic, we talked about it earlier and why you wanted to put it out. And some of those songs, am I right? Like some of those songs you had written at this point, like a few years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's interesting to kind of think about, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but to me, it's interesting to think about that album as sort of a reflection of you over the last few years, right?
Totally. Yeah. Which is why it was so important for me to like just conclude 2020 with it. Because I was like, I've had these songs for so freaking long. Like, I don't need to wait another few months to put these out. Like, I have so much more music. Literally, I could put out a song a month for like the next 3 years right now. So it's like, well, why would we wait to put this out?
Right. Why stop progress? I mean, in a few different interviews, I saw you talk about songwriting and creating music. And I'm paraphrasing, but kind of as a process to like reflect yourself to yourself, like almost as a way of self-discovery and growth.
Yeah.
And, am I right about that? Like, is that kind of how it works for you? Like that process, you kind of learn about yourself as you're writing music?
Yeah, totally. I mean, in an interview I did the other day at Hard, it was like, one of my favorite things about songwriting is finding out what I'm saying to myself, like months later. Like Underwater, I thought it was going to be like this breakup song or like this letting go song. And then months later, I think on a live stream or something, I was like, this is my breakup song to the patriarchy. Like the words just came out of my mouth. And then like thinking back, I'm like, oh my God, it is my breakup song to the patriarchy. And it's like, I've been waiting for you to fulfill this like lifestyle to where you like come through for me, and time again, like you're letting me down and like I'm not waiting up for you anymore. And that's, so it's like I love finding out what I'm writing about.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It makes me think about what we were talking about earlier with early childhood development and therapy, and sort of going back to things in your past and reanalyzing them to figure out where you're at now. I love the idea of thinking about that in terms of songwriting as well. Let me ask you 2 quick questions and we'll get you out of here. Real quick, just because we were talking about songwriting, I did want to make sure I asked just a little bit about your process of songwriting. Is there a process? Is there a standard process? Has it changed over time? What is sitting down to write a song look like for you?
A lot of the time it starts with chords, or if I'm with a producer, a specific loop that I choose. Like they'll show me different clips and I'll say like, I really like this one. And then we'll listen to that over and over. And then I kind of come up with a melody. And then from there, I'll just flesh out lyrics, and then I'll start writing stuff. And then like, I let my subconscious take the reins, because I'll write different words. Like with Underwater, what came out was like, I can't wait up for you, thought you were on your way. And I was like, I can't wait up for you, thought you were on your way. Okay, so I'm obviously writing about something that I've been waiting for and they keep not showing up. So then I was like, oh, well, I'll write about a relationship. I let the words come out and then I just go from there. And it's just super fun to see what ends up happening.
That's very, very interesting. Because again, that's instinct. That's 100% instinct, 0% calculation. And I don't think that's how everybody writes. That's really interesting.
No, yeah, I'm totally like a gut feeling kind of person.
Well, I love that, and I know you got to go, so I will wrap this up. Before we do, is there anything else we didn't talk about? Anything else you want to let people know? Anything else that's on your mind?
I guess I would just say, don't let fear. I mean, it's hard because I personally like can be afraid of so many things, but it's so important to just have a little bit more courage than your fear and just do the things that make you happy, even though it feels completely weird and just completely like, how am I going to make money this way? How am I going to do this? Like, it's just so important to like live as free as possible. And if you feel you need to do something, it's because you do. And if you feel you want to put out this song or make this painting or write this poem, but you haven't because it's not perfect or whatever, like just do it anyway. That's really the only thing I have to say.
Man, well, I couldn't have said it any better. That's fantastic. And I'm going to ask you one quick question. It's the same question I ask at the end of each one of these interviews. Just looking for a time in your life, a memory, a moment, and it could be from any time, when in that moment, music really deeply affected you, really had a deep impact on you in that moment. And it doesn't have to be a significant moment, and there's really no wrong answer to this question.
The first thing that comes to mind, obviously there's been so many, but the first one that came to my mind was when Huxley put out his song Box Clever. It was right kind of around the time I was really getting into house music, and the sample that he uses, I mean, the production is so epic, and then the sample that he uses is like a woman just saying like, I'm a prisoner of words unsaid. And it's just, I don't know. I just could fall deep into that song, and it was really important for me at the time. So I would say that song definitely at that time.
I love that. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing, because I think we can all relate to that. Sometimes you just hear the right song at the right time. There doesn't have to be a reason behind it, and it just changes something in your brain, and you look at the world differently or feel it differently. And I don't know. I think that's why we're all doing it. I love that. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time.
Yeah, really great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome back anytime. I hope you have a great day. Have a good flight later on. All of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.